Today we're going to talk about the respiratory system. First things first, let's talk about the functions of the respiratory system. So, one function of the respiratory system is ventilation. Ventilation is defined as an exchange between the air from the atmosphere and the alveoli in the lungs. And the alveoli are basically like these grape-like ends on these lung vessels that are called bronchioles, and this is where the exchange between the lungs and blood occurs. So this is important for external respiration. So let's start off with that. External respiration is basically exchange of air between the alveoli and the blood in the capillaries. So because both the alveoli and these capillaries have a thin membrane, it's very easy for gases to diffuse and exchange between each other. So initially what happens is we breathe air in. The air will go towards our alveoli, and this air that we breathe in will have a high concentration of oxygen and a low concentration of carbon dioxide. On the other hand, the blood that's coming from the right side of the heart is deoxygenated, and it will have a low concentration of oxygen and a high concentration of carbon dioxide. So when they meet, we will have diffusion. So what is diffusion? The law of diffusion states that something that has a high concentration will tend to move towards something that has a low concentration. So in our case, because we have a high concentration of oxygen in the alveoli, it will diffuse readily into the low concentration of oxygen in the pulmonary capillaries. And because we have a high concentration of carbon dioxide in the pulmonary capillaries, it will diffuse readily into the alveoli and be breathed out as carbon dioxide. So once we have this exchange, our blood is now oxygenated, and that blood can be transported to body tissues. So that's the point of external respiration, to oxygenate the blood, have this exchange, and transport blood to the body tissues. Now, internal respiration involves the blood and body tissues, and more specifically, body cells. So, the left side of the heart now is pumping this oxygenated blood throughout the body tissues, and this body tissue is reaching systematic capillaries, and that's where we'll get our internal respiration. So, the cells in our body that are close to systematic capillaries can exchange gas with it. So now let's talk about the particular gases in each particular system. So the systematic capillaries have a high amount of have a high amount of oxygen inside of it and a low amount of carbon dioxide. The body cells, since they're constantly doing cellular respiration, they're using up all their oxygen, so they have a low amount of oxygen, but a high amount of carbon dioxide because that's a byproduct of cellular respiration. So once again, what are we going to have? The law of diffusion states that something that has a high concentration will tend to diffuse into something that's a low concentration. So the high concentration in the systematic capillary will diffuse. High concentration of oxygen in the systematic capillary will diffuse into the low concentration of oxygen in the body cells, and the high concentration of carbon dioxide from the body cells will diffuse into the low concentration of carbon dioxide in the systematic capillaries. So why do we want this exchange to happen? Remember, our cells need to produce ATP, and they're constantly metabolic active. So we need to give the cells oxygen so it can perform cellular respiration to make ATP. So once we have this exchange, the blood will now become deoxygenated again because it's giving up its oxygen and have more carbon dioxide, and we'll repeat the process all over that we had in the beginning, and we'll try to oxygenate the blood again. All right, that's respiration. Now, another function of the respiratory system is sound production. So when air flows through our larynx, this allows us to produce sound. Smell. I made a mistake over here. The smell and pH balance should be separate bullet points. So smell, we have um, we have uh, in our nasal cavity we have olfactory receptors. So when you breathe in, the respiratory system is related to olfaction. So because of the olfactory receptors, we can smell. pH balance. So if we control the rate of breathing, we can change the amount of carbon dioxide we have in our body. So if we have too much carbon dioxide, this will lead to a higher formation of carbonic acid, which will release hydronium ions and lower the pH. So the respiratory system is very closely linked to pH balance because if we have too much carbon dioxide, we can make our blood acidic. If we have too little carbon dioxide, we can make our blood basic. And then finally, another function of the respiratory system is internal pressure changes. So if we create pressure in our intra-abdominal cavity, this can help us with bowel movements, but this also is common with power lifters, people that lift weights. If you want to lift a higher amount of weight, people do something called the Valsalva maneuver, in which they breathe in and create like a deep pressure in the stomach, and this increases the blood pressure and allows them to lift more weights at one rep. Just to go over the respiration one more time, but with a diagram. First step is ventilation. So remember what we said, ventilation is an exchange between the air from the atmosphere and the alveoli, right? Second step is going to be gas exchange, but it's going to be, when we talk about gas exchange in this instance, this is external respiration. So we're getting an exchange between the alveoli and the pulmonary capillaries. So oxygen from the alveoli goes into the low concentration in the pulmonary capillaries, and carbon dioxide from the pulmonary capillaries goes to the alveoli as we breathe out. So then this oxygenated blood is pumped by the left side of the heart to the systematic capillaries. And over here we have this exchange between the body cells and the systematic capillaries, in which the body cells receive oxygen from the systematic capillaries to create more ATP, and they take the metabolic waste from the body cells and transfer it to the systematic capillaries to the right side of the heart, and begin the cycle over again. And that is